Early in the morning, sunlight peeked through the thin clouds, casting its light down onto the wide road where Mr. John was driving. The peaceful morning air was shattered by the sudden honking of a truck speeding towards him. Without time to react, Mr. John's car was struck hard. The collision threw him out of his seat, his head slammed into the steering wheel, and he lost consciousness. When he woke up, he found himself in a hospital bed, his body aching everywhere, especially his legs and arms. The doctor informed him that he had fractured both of his legs and would need to undergo a long surgery and recovery period. But in the midst of his physical pain, what hurt him even more was the strange feeling of loneliness in the hospital room. He had been lying there for days without receiving a single call or message from his son, Ben. He thought back to the days when his family was full of laughter. Back then, Ben was still young, always by his side, and he had been a loving father, attentive to every need of his son. However, everything changed when he faced a financial crisis. During those tough years, he was unable to provide for his family, and Ben began to feel abandoned when his father could no longer give him what he needed. After leaving home, Ben never came back to visit, and between them grew a gap that could not be filled. He had tried calling and texting, but never received a response. The loneliness hit him like a wave, washing away all hope within him. Although he had repeatedly told himself that he didn't need Ben's presence to live, now, lying in his hospital bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the son he had lost. Every night in the hospital, he thought about Ben, recalling the beautiful memories of when they were father and son, sharing precious moments in life. But now, all that remained were painful memories. In the quiet of the hospital, Mr. John realized that, although he could have everything in the world, money, fame, and success, he was still missing the most important thing, family, the loving connection between a father and son. After weeks of recovery in the hospital, Mr. John began to feel a mix of emotions. His physical wounds would heal over time, but the wounds in his soul would not be so easily mended. He couldn't stop thinking about Ben, the son he hadn't seen in years, ever since he fell into financial hardship. Their relationship had cracked, and Ben had left without ever coming back. Despite being in the hospital, Mr. John still felt the loneliness and emptiness, not because of the wounds on his body, but because of the distance from his son. One late night, as darkness covered the sky, Mr. John lay in his hospital bed, staring at the white ceiling. He recalled the old days, when his family was happy, when Ben was a young, innocent child running around the house, talking about their future dreams. But now, all those memories were nothing but pain, a regret for the mistakes he had made. He remembered the times when he had not spent enough time with Ben because work and life had become too stressful. Then, he recalled the last time Ben called him, saying he wanted to leave home because he couldn't bear the pressures of life. The next morning, when the doctor came to check on him, Mr. John made a decision. He couldn't live without seeking forgiveness from his son. That determination burned within him so strongly that he felt he would do anything to fix his past mistakes. He didn't want to die alone and filled with regret, without doing anything to mend the relationship with Ben. Though he knew that Ben might refuse to meet him, or perhaps might not want to face the painful past, he decided to take action. His love for his son and the remorse in his heart made him forget about all the difficulties he might face in his journey to find his son. He called some old friends, people who might be able to help him find information about Ben. All the resources he had, from money to relationships, he used to search for his son. At this point, Mr. John no longer cared about Ben's coldness or indifference. He only wanted to do one thing, meet Ben, apologize, and hope to start over. Even though he didn't know where Ben was, he felt ready to face whatever might come, even if Ben rejected him. He no longer thought about whether Ben would forgive him, he simply hoped for a chance to be close to his son once again. Life's hardships could take everything away, but they couldn't take away the love he had for Ben. And so, he was determined to begin the journey of searching for his son, hoping that one day, the two of them would be able to heal the wounds in their hearts. Mr. John spent months searching hopelessly, traveling through cities, towns, and Ben's relationships, but there was no sign that his son remembered him. Every day, he would go to a new place, asking about his old friends, but the answer was always, "Ben doesn't live here anymore," or, "We don't know where he went." The cold stares of strangers seemed to pierce into the depths of his heart, and the rejections from Ben's old friends only made him feel the loneliness take over. The sense of loss and isolation of a father estranged from his son grew heavier with each passing day. What Mr. John didn't know was that he was facing not only a physical challenge but also an emotional one. His determination to find his son was not just a geographical journey, it was also a journey to confront himself. The feeling of regret, the feeling of not being able to fulfill his duty as a father, lingered like a wound that could never heal. Every day, he woke up early, ate breakfast alone, and continued his search. The encounters with Ben's acquaintances never brought any hope. There were even times when he felt as if he was walking in an endless circle with no way out. At every place he visited, no one knew anything about Ben, and he could never find a clear answer. The disappointment was something he could no longer hide. He had hoped to meet his son, but now, he only felt deep despair. Once again, he faced the coldness and indifference, factors he could not control. He couldn't stop asking himself whether the old wounds, the mistakes of the past, were too big to be forgiven. However, amidst the rain of disappointment, a tiny glimmer of hope flickered in his heart. Every morning, he woke up stronger, as if his faith in his son had never waned. And even though he had to continue going to unfamiliar places, he still believed that one day, his son would forgive him and come back. Although exhausted from the seemingly hopeless search, he could not give up. Deep in his heart, he knew that his son was somewhere, and his redemption could only be complete when he found Ben, no matter how long it took. Tired and frustrated, Mr. John sat quietly on a wooden bench outside Ben's old apartment. His heart was heavy, and the months of searching felt endless, with no light in sight. He had hoped, he had trusted that eventually, his son would return, but all he received was emptiness, a space void of Ben. The evening sky was turning dark, the light fading, and Mr. John felt like he was lost in his own life. The loneliness was even more apparent as he sat alone outside the house where Ben had once lived, remembering the old days, when they played together, talked about their old dreams. But now, all of that was just memory. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approached from behind him. Mr. John looked up and saw a strange woman walking towards him. The man seemed to be a friend of Ben's. Mr. John didn't recognize him, but in the man's eyes, he could see empathy, as if he understood his pain. "Who are you looking for?" the woman asked, her tone cautious but not lacking curiosity. "Ben. I'm Ben's father," Mr. John replied, his voice hoarse. The man stood still, looking at him for a moment, then nodded gently. He didn't ask anything further, just handed him a photo. "This is Ben," he said softly. She moved away. "But before she left this photo for me." Mr. John took the photo. In it, Ben was standing in front of a small house, holding a child in her arms. His mind swirled, a strong emotion rising within him as he saw this. Ben had a child, something he hadn't expected. Finally, he had some information about his daughter, even though he couldn't meet her right now. Ben lives in a small town, working to support her child. She's changed, the man continued, his eyes a bit sad. "I think, you should go there." Mr. John clenched the photo tightly in his hand, his heart heavy. He looked at the picture one last time, Ben's eyes looking at him as if sending a message, a forgiveness. But would his daughter still want to meet him? What could he do to redeem his past mistakes? "Thank you," Mr. John said, his voice weak but sincere. The man only smiled, then turned and walked away, leaving Mr. John sitting there, watching his figure fade. At that moment, Mr. John realized that his journey was not over. Despite the failures, the difficulties, he could not give up. He had to continue searching for Ben, even if his son didn't want to meet him. And now, he knew he had to go to that small town where Ben lived with her small family. He stood up, folded the wooden chair, and walked off into the night. Each step was filled with hope, and he couldn't stop. The town felt still in the evening light. Mr. John got out of his old car and looked at the small cafe where Ben worked. The cafe, although unremarkable, had its own charm. The old wooden chairs, the simple coffee tables, everything reminded him of the old days when the family was together, when everything was whole. He walked up to the door, a strange feeling brushed through his body, a feeling of unfamiliarity, of years lost. As he stood before the cafe door, Ben was busy cleaning, wearing a coffee apron, her face stiff when she saw her father. Her eyes widened for a moment, as if she couldn't believe it. Then, in an instant, coldness appeared on Ben's face. She didn't say anything, just stood there, looking at Mr. John as if she couldn't believe her father was there. The atmosphere became still, all sounds around them seemed to suddenly mute. The last rays of the day streamed through the windows, casting a weak light into the corner of the cafe, making the space feel heavier. Ben turned away, refusing to face him, like a natural reflex to the father she had distanced herself from for so many years. But Mr. John, though his heart was full of shame and disappointment about himself, could not give up. He followed his daughter with his gaze, his eyes filled with sorrow and a longing for reconciliation. Mr. John closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering all his strength within, then slowly stepped toward Ben. When I was young, I didn't understand the importance of fatherhood. I was too focused on work, on big things, and ignored you. You've had to endure my absence for too long. I'm truly sorry, Ben. If I could go back, I wish I could change so many things, Mr. John said, his voice choked with emotion. Ben still didn't look at him, but her shoulders trembled slightly, as if the words from her father stirred up some painful feeling in her. A moment of silence passed. The two of them stood close together, but the distance between them felt like a deep chasm, not easy to cross. Ben sighed, then slowly turned to face her father. Her eyes, though filled with pain, also reflected some softness. She didn't say anything, just silently listened to her father's words, but deep inside Ben, emotions she couldn't express were rising. I don't know what to do with what happened. I don't want to forgive easily, but I can't deny that I've always been waiting for an apology from you. And today, hearing you say these words, I don't know, Ben finally spoke, her voice hoarse. You don't know all the pain I've been through. But I can't keep blaming you forever. Mr. John swallowed hard, his voice thick. He took a step closer, his hands trembling as he wanted to touch Ben's shoulder, but hesitated. I understand, Ben. I can't change the past, but I want to make things right. I want you to know that I love you, even though I've been wrong all these years. For the first time throughout the conversation, Ben didn't step back. She stood still, her eyes slowly lighting up with a glimmer of hope, a light that Mr. John never imagined would appear in his daughter's eyes. Ben smiled softly, not a fully happy smile, but a smile of forgiveness, of a new beginning. Maybe we can start over, Ben said, and her voice broke, light but full of hope. The two of them stood there, in the small cafe, a place that had witnessed so many changes in their lives over the years. But now, everything seemed ready for a new chapter. A new beginning, not only for Ben and Mr. John, but for their whole family. The old wounds might never be erased, but they could be healed.